2, 1. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Joel Rosen, the Stress Recovery Ninja. Welcome you guys back to another edition of your Adrenal Fix podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Brant Larson. He's a chiropractor who focuses on helping chronic condition patients get their lives back, and he uses functional nutrition, cellular healing, cellular detoxification, cranial adjustments, applied kinesiology, and something that he calls neurocentric chiropractic. So, Dr. Larson, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey there, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I think I've been trying to get you to do this for a while, and I think that the star and the moon collided, and we finally were able to get on the call. So I want to thank you for that. So before I dive right in and ask you your perspective on what you're seeing with your practice, with people that are coming in exhausted and burnt out, and they've tried so many different things, but yet they're still dealing with an exhaustion fatigue problem, and you have a different way of assessing some of these outside the box concerns that are legitimately playing on their energy production. But before I do that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just so that we know who you are and why you do what you do.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a chiropractor, like you said. I practice in just probably 30 miles north of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So I'm in Minnesota. It's nice and cold here right now. I've been in practice about 15 years. Originally got into it because I had issues. I had a hamstring pull. I pulled a hamstring in my first track meet in college. Pretty much ended my career. Went on a quest to try to figure out what was going on with me. Realized I had back pain. Realized I had digestive issues. Realized I had just kind of muscle stiffness everywhere. I had chemical sensitivities, things that I wasn't fully aware with. I was a good athlete. I was strong, fast. I could jump. But I kept getting injured all the time. It was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's what led me to chiropractic. It led me to more so applied kinesiology and some of the muscle testing aspects. So right off the bat in chiropractic school, that's kind of what I focused on, tried to solve why I had my issues. And it really helped me tremendously, going outside of that model. I had chronic allergies growing up. I mean, just horrendous allergies all the time. I had allergy shots every single Saturday morning for 3 years straight. I had 3 shots. So I had 2 shots in one arm, 1 shot in the other, and it would flip the next week. I'd have 2 in one and 1 in the other, right? For 3 years straight. That's a lot of shots. And it never really helped. I mean, it took the edge off a little bit. I wasn't quite as reactive. And it wasn't until probably almost 6, 7, 8 years in practice where I finally figured out I've got parasites. So I cleared those out. I saw them. They were there. And literally in that instant, I had no congestion. Everything was gone. And it was just like that. I cleared them, saw them, gross, but I mean, it was instant, just like that. It cleared out my allergies, cleared out my, kind of getting fatigued, because when you have allergies, you have fatigue, and it's adrenal fatigue, and it's the whole stress response. Your body's reacting all the time. And it was a big load off of my system, so that's kind of how I got involved in all of this, and why I kept searching. And why it wasn't, for me, it wasn't just about the adjustments. Like yourself, you're a chiropractor, but you've looked deeper because there was more issues going on.
Yeah, well, I have a similar story in that regards, and I think we all do when we are on a mission to help other people that are suffering with a health problem. We probably suffered ourselves the majority of the time, and it takes one to know one, and our goal is to help other people. I had that myself, exhaustion, fatigue. My mom is a public health nurse, and they went into the school systems to immunize the kids. So whatever the kids got, I got all the time. And going to the dentist and not really having a choice, and being put silver fillings in my mouth, always being put on antibiotics when I was sick. Thank God I didn't have allergy issues, but I probably would have had the 2 in 1 on each arm as well. But what I wanted to ask you from what you just described there, Brant, is How did you know on your radar that potentially parasites were there? And because I wanted to talk to you, that was a bit of an agenda today too, because I know you have some good background in that. What made you think that this was parasitic related?
It actually wasn't me. I mean, I had been getting worked on for a number of years, and we had done some herbs and things to try to kill things off. And I was definitely getting better. I mean, I had drastically taken the edge off. I was much, much better, but I still had sinus congestion. I still had, every now and then, certain times of the year, there'd be a week or two where I would just, still have those symptoms. My parents own a hobby farm, just 20 acres, 3 cows. That's where we get our organic, grass-fed beef. So I grew up baling hay since I was in like 2nd grade. And just 5 acres wasn't a whole lot. Every single summer, though, I had to drive the tractor. I could not be behind. There's no way I'd be on the ground for 10 minutes straight, sneezing literally for 10 minutes straight and totally exhausted. And so the edge got taken off with some of the things I was doing, but it wasn't until there was a person that I had met who was a rep for one of the nutrition companies that both you and I have used. And he found it on me, and he found a little bit different approach, a little bit higher quantity of dosage of how to kill these things. And it was literally 30 days. And there's a little more to that story, but about 30 days, and I killed them off, high dosage, and the rest is history. But that's kind of how that came into play. He tested me, just another set of eyes, another person looking at me at a different angle, a different way, a different technique. And he said, "Man, you got parasites." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of think I do, but I've worked on them for years." But it wasn't until this particular program just unlocked everything for me.
Cool. All right. So to summarize that, so we look at the best of both worlds from a Western medicine, looking at the allopathic model and blood chemistry and proper history taking and all the things that you use in clinical decision-making processes to get some insights, but then you're still left with a certain amount of sneezing, a certain amount of fatiguing and tearing up, and something's being missed. And
Yeah.
so where we look in terms of the Eastern medicine model, where you can get the best of both worlds, you're looking at energies and frequencies. And I explain that to people in the way where in science you have biology and chemistry, and that's where a lot of the Western allopathic model looks at. They test for biology and chemistry and pharmaceuticals that are addressing the biology and chemistry of things. Yeah. But there's another branch of science called physics. And we forget about that in terms of that's how we develop these vaccinations, because we have these frequencies that are similar to the attenuated virus that causes your own immune system to produce a defense. So we definitely harness Eastern medicine we harness frequency in Western medicine with pharmaceuticals. But why don't you give us a little bit of an idea for those that don't really understand AK or applied kinesiology or muscle testing and how that harnesses the frequencies of what you're testing to glean information, like in your case, to determine if there were parasites and what kind of broad reaching impact that can have in terms of determining other things.
Yeah, and that's really key because, like I've told people for years now, since I first discovered that, blood work is great, stool samples, all these things are fantastic. And let's just talk parasites here. They're going to miss a lot of those things. Eosinophils on a blood test are kind of considered like, if they're high, that's a white blood cell. If they're high, that could be parasites. Rarely do I see that high in people that I suspect parasites in on their history or even the kinesiology type testing. And the proof there is really, I get emails with pictures, of what people's toilets. So you see, what's in there. And I kick myself because when I released my parasites, I had, I don't bring my phone in the bathroom like a lot of people do. My kids do it all the time, right? I tell them, don't bring the phone in the bathroom. Just do your business and get out. I didn't bring mine in there, and I kicked myself because I could have taken a picture, right? But I get pictures all the time of people that are getting rid of this stuff. And the proof is right there, yet their stool samples are fine, their blood tests are fine, all these other medical type tests are fine, right? So what kinesiology, applied kinesiology, muscle testing, many, many different names for it, it really brings to the table that specificity and, like you said, the physics aspect of it. Because you might be touching like a liver point, down here with one hand, and maybe trying to pull someone's, pinky and thumb apart. And that energy of that body, is it getting drained? Is it on a dimmer switch? Is it not working how it's supposed to? Or maybe a straight arm test or something. And of course, there's lots of abuse in this in our industry too, right? People trying to scam, people trying to sell products or supplements or things. And like any industry, of course, but there is a lot of merit to it. And I found it to be such a powerful tool to figure out what's really going on and to pinpoint things. And it's just something that people need to know. It needs to be out there. They need to be aware of this and just have their mind blown and go, wow, that's amazing. How does that work? But it works. It works as long as you get someone who, isn't shady, isn't trying to sell you something or scam you. Like any profession, it could be a car salesman, it could be an auto mechanic, it could be a dentist, whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? We have that in every single profession. But it's a tool, it's powerful, and it's here to stay.
It's awesome. It helps with difficult chronic condition cases that have tried everything and bring in these stacks of paperwork and spent tens of thousands of dollars. And unfortunately, I guess you'll see, like I do, we see a lot of the people that have already exhausted a lot of that stuff already to finally, like, they're at their wit's end where they finally have to try something a little bit more in that way. But just to sort of expand upon what you talked about with Dr. Marshall and listening to a lot of his podcast, he talked about where they did a study, I think it was UC Davis, where they ended up getting these dogs from the pound and testing their stool and not seeing any parasites whatsoever. And unfortunately, they sacrificed the dogs, and they saw, I think, about 70% of the ones that were negative had parasites in their stool or in their biome. But now they even have, this was before they had the DNA testing, because he was talking about, and one day they'll have the DNA test. So they do have the DNA testing now. But I guess the summary of that point is that just because it's not on an objective medical allopathic blood chemistry test doesn't mean it's not there. And a case in point is that autistic kids versus non-autistic kids, you test their hair samples, and a lot of the non-autistic kids will have higher levels of metals or on their hair, and you would think they'd have lower, but they don't have lower. They're getting it out of the body. And the ones that are autistic aren't able to get it out. So just because it's not necessarily on a Western blood chemistry test or hair sample or stool test doesn't mean that it's not there. And that's where the frequency testing, where people may be skeptical, I would say, well, you weren't skeptical when you took your immunization, you just did it, and that worked on the same principle. So I guess the question would be now, what I'm really excited to talk about with you is how you've been able to add that to your neurocentric chiropractic, as you call it, and what you've seen in terms of, you were discussing with me earlier before we got on the call, some case studies where you're able to pull not just parasitic activity, but other energetic interferences. So let's talk about that for those that are dealing with exhaustion fatigue and they just are at their wit's end and they need to know there's other things that you may not have considered. So what would some of those things be?
Right. So, and that's been kind of fun for my practice especially probably the last 6 months to a year. I mean, I've seen these things for quite a number of years, but it's really been kind of fun really diving into it. And I like your approach because adrenal fatigue recovery ninja, moving into more of the stress aspect, because it is more of that, right? And it's limiting the stress that are on our body. And I call it neurocentric because when I muscle test, muscle test all the individual muscles of the shoulder or the legs or the lower back and kind of all over the body, whether it's a high school athlete, whether it's a 35-year-old young mom, a 65-year-old male, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But what I'm looking for is, where is that neurological disturbance happening? That's the first thing that I want to find. And it might be parasitic, it might be something else. And one thing that I've really noticed over time was dental issues, orthodontic appliances, even piercings. So a lot of people who have fatigue, exhaustion, and things, they also have chronic pain. Those things kind of tend to go hand in hand. So I'll give you a couple stories. One was a pain case, which she also had fatigue and exhaustion as well. And I muscle tested her, all the muscles in her body, and it was the left side of her body was weak. That was it. So neurologically inhibited, right? So that dimmer switch was on. So when I check the left arm versus the right arm she can hold solid, the left arm she can't, or the left leg or the left lower back or whatever. And this case took me about 5 visits to figure out. And one day I'm looking, and she had left-sided pain for 10 years. Okay, I'll back that up a little bit. She had chronic left-sided pain for around 10 years, seen multiple chiropractors, multiple doctors. Her daughter worked for a chiropractor. And she heard about me, decided to come in, give it a shot, right? Just like we had said, people are at their wits' end, and we're like the last people they show up at. So left-sided pain, I couldn't quite figure it out for about 5-6 visits. And one day I'm at the foot of the table, and I'm looking up at her, and I look at her again. I'm looking on the right and the left, and I realize she has earrings in the left side and no earrings in the right side. Okay. And I asked her, I said, "Do you always wear earrings in just your left side?" She's like, "Yeah, always. Maybe rarely do I put some in for a special occasion on my right." All right. I said, "Take those out." She had 3 of them just right down here. So she takes them out, and I go back and I do all my neurological muscle testing. Everything was rock solid on her left side. So that was a Thursday night. She came back in on the following Monday, and I was super excited to see her. I met her at the door. I said, "Okay, what happened?" And I said, I gotta know. And she was kind of like, "Really? You're that excited?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm that excited. I want to know what the heck happened." All smiles. She said, "I woke up the next morning. I had no pain. Not one pain. Nothing. Gone." And that was 6 months ago. And that pain is still gone. So somewhere, what I call a neurocentric dysfunction, something interfering with that neurological system, the earrings were doing that. The metal, the piercing, the something, I can't pinpoint it. I don't know for sure. All I know is that when she took these out, everything went strong and her pain went away. From that, her fatigue is gone, the exhaustion is gone, because obviously you're out of pain. And when people are in pain, they're fatigued, they're exhausted, they get so tired from the pain they can't sleep, right? So that's one case. Another one came in, another piercing one, and she had 7 years of chronic fatigue. She didn't really have pain. It was brain fog. It was fatigue. She was diagnosed by multiple practitioners with adrenal fatigue, and she wasn't getting anywhere with supplements and things like that. So I took a look at her, and with our reflex testing, right, we use the different reflexes, like I said, the liver or the large intestine or the thyroid or whatever it might be. Well, one of my, I guess, markers on the body, you could say, my reference points of knowing where to touch on that person is the belly button. So I found her belly button, and I was going to go off to the side of it to look for the large intestine reflex. Well, in her belly button was a belly button piercing. I said, "Okay, let's take that out." All of her findings changed. Everything changed. She had food reactivity, changed. She had adrenal weakness in the body, changed. She had muscle weakness, changed. And I actually have this on video of that day, and I have her coming back on video 7 days later. Her mom was there with her. She was about 35 years old. They were so excited. They came back. And the mom said she was a different kid on the way home. Completely different. Brain fog was gone. Her depression, I didn't mention that, her depression lifted. I mean, she was a different person, and she continued to be a different person for the next week. That was probably a year ago now. And just from moving that belly button piercing, which was disrupting her somehow neurologically, all those things changed. So that's where I kind of came up with that term, neurocentric. So I'm trying to see what's interfering with the nervous system, you know. And sometimes it can be a piercing. Sometimes it can be a dental retainer. I've got a number of cases of those where they have that wire that's on the bottom or a plastic one on top. I can talk more about a few of those too, but that's been a lot of fun last 6 months or so.
Really interesting, you know, and if I'm listening to it as sort of a bit of a doubting Thomas, and I'm thinking, okay, it kind of sounds hocus pocus to me. I mean, even from my own perspective, where I'm from a traditional family and my mom is a public health nurse and my sister is a family practice doctor. And I was always the black sheep member of the holistic family, so to speak. And even for me, I get that feeling of, well, you know, it kind of sounds like what's going on there. But to come back to the frequency and the way that I've now used that as, like you've mentioned, a tool, because we've tried everything else. And unfortunately, by the time they've come to us, it's thousands of dollars later and frustration and 7 years and loss of quality of life. We're open-minded for that stuff, but to give the listener a bit of an explanation, at least from my point of view, and maybe you could agree or add to it, is the fact that, again, we're talking about frequencies and we're talking about energy production of the body. And, you know, Dr. Mike Johnson always, I'll remember talking about, like, you have, you know, a living person and then God forbid they get struck by lightning, they're on the ground and they're dead right in front of you. What's changed is the life force, right, through the body. And there's a vital life force through the body, and that's energy producing. And when you look at qi in Oriental or Asian medicine or Eastern medicine, you have the flowing of energy through the body, and it goes into and out of the hands. And a lot of the times when you have what's called interference fields, or you have traumas, scar tissues, electrical devices, EMFs now with cell phones, pathogens from the foods that we eat, they reflexively sedate the flowing of energy through the body, right? I mean, the example I use all the time is you run over an extension cord and with a lawnmower, but you want to use it again, so you tape a black electrical tape around it, but it just doesn't quite always hit. So sometimes it goes out, sometimes it doesn't. And that's the analogy I use to people, is think of your scar tissues or electrical devices or tattoos or EMFs or even you know, emotional scar tissues. They can reflexively sedate a thyroid, which is necessary for oxygen uptake into the cell. It could reflexively sedate adrenals, which is helpful for dealing with stress and being able to mount a stress response. Your digestive processes, so now you're not secreting enough acid and the food ferments and it creates a whole host of immune challenges. So I think that helps the listener get a little bit of, okay, yeah, I mean, just because I don't see a sound wave coming out of the wall doesn't mean I can't have music being produced out of thin air. Now it makes a little more sense, right? So would you agree with that or add anything on to that at all?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you know, I think some things we can kind of rationalize in our minds. I think some things we just don't have science yet to kind of fully grasp all of it. I think a lot of it's going to come down to frequency. Even when I tell patients about, you know, I use little vials in my office sometimes to figure out different frequencies. And one of my standard analogies is when you go get an EKG done, do they stick a probe in your heart, you know, to measure your heart? No, they stick a sticker on you. What are they measuring? They're measuring the electrical activity turning into magnetic activity coming off. That's basic physics right there. Basic physics. Anytime you have electricity, you have a magnetic field. So same with an EKG, right? I mean, they don't stick the probe in there. They could probably measure that way out here somewhere. But why would you? Just put the sticker on the chest, right? Same thing with MRI. MRI is magnetic resonance imaging. It's imaging or recording the magnetic activity coming off this electrical being that we are. So I think some things can be explained by nerves. So I've seen patients who have had belly button piercings and they have chronic low back pain. Well, that kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, think about if you have a tack in your shoe or in your foot, like a little thing irritating it, or like a little pebble in your shoe. Your foot always wants to reflexively pull away. That's just hardwired neurology. Well, now think about putting that tack or that pebble permanently in your skin. Your body wants to pull away from that. So it wants to contract your abs and turn off your low back. So what are you going to get? You're going to get low back pain from that. So things like that, I think you can kind of explain more with, standard neurology. For the rest of it, yeah, I think there's so much more communication. You had touched on interference fields. My goodness. I find those things all the time. The scar tissue. My own son, the first person I ever found an interference field on, he had a lazy right eye. And I get calls from around the world on this because I have a video on YouTube about it. And he had a lazy right eye. So he'd watch TV like this. He'd stare at the TV with his left field of view. And I couldn't figure it out. Doctors got him glasses, of course. I never let him wear them because I was bound and determined to figure the thing out. And finally, one day I heard about Dr. Marshall. I heard about interference fields and this whole mud packing regime. And I thought, man, this was my one kid who had a big cone on his head when he was born. And it went away, 24 hours later. I tested him with this muscle testing, hocus pocus, right? And sure enough, it was reflexing to the right eye, and it was sedating the right eye, or neurologically inhibiting. Something was causing an issue there. Literally put mud on his head twice for 10 minutes each time, a certain kind of mud for the listeners, certain kind of mud, straighten his eye right out. Something was disorganized in his nervous system, and it straightened his eye right out. He has 20/20 vision to this day, never worn glasses, and his vision was tanking, and he had a lazy right eye. And that was literally it. It was an interference field, some type of communication issue from that trauma when he was born. I think he was around 7 years old when I noticed his eye doing that. He's 14 now. So, yeah, great vision.
Yeah, and I think that I'm obviously the people that come and see you are open-minded to do that. And I think on the whole, you're seeing a paradigm shift from just the allopathic, traditional, a pharmaceutically driven model of take this for that, and nothing's wrong except the fact that you're hysterical and you're anxious and you need to take this or that. I think it just it leads for people to being more open-minded and more educated about what's going on here. And really, North America, as great as we are in terms of the educational system and I guess the medicine, the practice of medicine and healthcare, is not as up on the European model of what it means to be integrative, and really considering all things in the body. So as far as for you though, what other clinical, so we've to summarize, we've looked at interference fields, we've looked at parasites or talked about parasites, we're looking at a neurocentric, so what may be going on in the body that's impacting the nervous system to cause fatigue and illness and lack of function. What other clinical nuggets could you give our listeners that you've seen that come up once or twice or even more than that, and it's a hidden epidemic that people don't really know about that they really got to consider? What else have you seen?
Yeah, so like you said, we've got any piercings, you've got any type of orthodontic dental retainer or anything like that. Those can be hugely problematic because, and I'll get into the cranial stuff now. That's one area where I love it. I love the cranial stuff. I've had the weirdest, wildest things happen from people from adjusting the bones of the skull. And I should have brought my little cranial model. It's in the other room, but these 22 bones, they move. They move. And if they're stuck, I got people that their eyes are like this, they're twisted, distorted, they had a head injury, they had a car accident, they had a birth trauma, they had forceps delivery, they had vacuum extraction, suctions, things like that. And the longer I go in practice, the more I realize the farther up you get here, the more impact it has to the whole body. So cranial stuff, man, if you have a past head injury, if you have even like a whiplash, or you had a difficult birth, you had a C-section birth even, you want to get to someone that can, evaluate this, right? And make sure that you're okay. I've seen some of the craziest things happen. I had one guy who literally, he had chronic pain, chronic fatigue. He couldn't sleep for more than 3 hours a night for 10 years. And he had fractured his skull 10 years prior. That's when it started. Fractured his skull. He was in a car accident. He was going 80 miles an hour. He hit some black ice, hit a tree, bounced off the tree and nailed a house, and he fractured his skull in multiple places. Since that point, every single joint in his body was pain, fatigue, couldn't sleep, nothing. And he was about 35 years old, so 10 years before he was about 25. The guy looked like he was 150. He just looked horrible, as you would imagine, right? You can't sleep, you're in pain. Literally, I adjusted the bones of the skull, freed them up. I saw him 1 week later. I didn't even recognize the guy. So he tells me this story. He says, I finally figured out who he was. And I said, okay, what happened since last time? He said, well, when I left here, I couldn't make it home because it was about an hour and a half drive for him to get home. He said, so I called my friend who referred me in, and she lived about 45 minutes away. So he said, I asked if I could crash on her couch. And she said, yeah, that's fine. So I get to her house. I go sleep on her couch. I wake up and I go find her and I say, what day is it? And she says, it's Thursday. And he says, what day did I get here? And she said, Monday. The guy literally slept from Monday to Thursday, and he never woke up. Never. He didn't go to the bathroom. He didn't eat. He never woke up. I said, well, what the heck's happened since that point? Because you look totally different. He said, I can sleep 7-8 hours a night now. Whereas before, if he slept more than 3, his body, he would get sick, like literally sick, nauseous. He just feels sick. 7-8 hours a night. I have amazing energy. And he said, every single pain in my body is gone. Every single one of it. That was the second last time I saw the guy. That was it. I mean, that's rare. That's not going to happen to everyone that comes and gets a cranial adjustment. I have not seen that since. That was literally, I think, 13 years ago. Never seen it since. Probably won't ever see it again. But I can only imagine that his bones were so stuck, his nervous system was so under tension and torque that his body just said, okay, this guy's going to help me free this up. He freed it up, me. And we got to just shut down, heal, and repair. And this guy's not waking up for this process. Kind of like a caterpillar, becoming a butterfly or something. It's the only thing I can rationalize in my head. But since that point, I've been really big into cranial adjusting. I'm actually freeing those bones up. I have multiple different ways that I do it. And I just see some, fun stuff with it. But that was by far the strangest one I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's really rewarding. I know we've talked in terms of which area you wanted to focus in on and really finding what your niche is. And I think really what you've come into, Brant, is understanding the difficult cases and all the tools that you have in your toolbox to be able to allow the body to free itself. The summary I would say on that, though, is the elephant in the room has to be considered the elephant in the room, right? I mean, a good clinician will talk to you and get history notes and significant events. And I always love it where it's an afterthought. Oh, yeah, I had an accident where I was traveling 85 miles an hour and I hit a tree and my head and I was unconscious. You think that has anything to do with it? Because the doctors always say it has nothing to do with it. And I'm like, I think it has everything to do with it. Why have you not looked at that? So I guess the listener would be, hey, if you've had some major traumas, and we're talking not just physical traumas, emotional traumas, because that's where I really get into the stress response of of how your brain is plasticized on these traumas, not just physically, but also in terms of the chemicals that they release, the synapses that they create, and the corresponding action in the body that over time becomes habituated and almost addicted to the over-sympathetic driven system, and you have a supply and demand problem, all because of the significant elephants in the room. So the listeners have to understand from what you've just said there is, if you've had some major traumas, or you have had physical concerns or surgeries or emotional stuff or even apparatus and other things that you've had, and you're dealing with a chronic issue, then it behooves you to continue that open-mindedness of, at the end of the day, getting your health back, right? Because that's what we're talking about, is we don't really care how the plane flies. I just care that it gets me from, point A to point B. I don't need to have an engineering test to answer why gravity allows the wings of an airplane to, soar versus not. So, all right, well, that's super cool. As far as how do people get in contact with you? Are you seeing people? Obviously I have to come in to see you. So how does that work?
Yeah, most people come to see me. Get in contact with me is easiest through my website, drlarson.com. That's DRLARSEN.com. So it's Larson with an E. I know I mentioned that before to you earlier. Most of it's old, but yeah, I'm Danish. I'm Danish, not Swedish, right? I'm Danish.
Right.
So it's an EN. But yeah, my website has that. Obviously, it's, the way I work anyways, I'm looking for those certain things. So I'm looking for the cranial stuff, the dental things, whatever. So I got to have that exam, one-on-one. And people come from all over. I'm getting more and more people from distances and things that are calling up, and they find videos and whatnot. It's how that works. One thing I did want to mention earlier was, one of the things that I try to help new patients coming in on, or people that call me on the phone to understand is, like, for me, I'm not anti-medical whatsoever, right? And you're probably not as well, but it's not that that's wrong. And we as the consumer, I really do believe, need to start to understand and not force them to do a job that's not really their job. So that whole system was set up for acute crisis care. That's what it's for, right? And if we understand that is what that is for, now we can make better choices. Where we go wrong as consumers is we try to pigeonhole them into all healthcare, right? That's why this whole medical model. So we're very confused, health insurance and things, right? So I try to help people understand, no, that's for acute crisis care. That's what that's for. And if you don't have that, then you've got to go to other branches of healthcare, right? And it's kind of similar to like car insurance, right? People always call up and ask, do you take my insurance? Well, it's not whether I take your insurance, it's whether it fits in that model. So if we go from a car insurance perspective, what does car insurance pay for? It pays for catastrophic stuff, accidents, if you harm someone or if they harm you or whatever, right? That's what car insurance pays for. Now, granted, I know that our health insurance costs are way up here and they should be down here farther, and car insurance is lower, but it's the same model, right? Whereas your health insurance pays for those catastrophic type things. But car insurance, I know you're not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not trying to buy my gas or have my car insurance pay for my gas or my car washes or my air filter or my oil changes or my new brakes or my new tires, right? I'm not trying to pay for or get them to pay for the health and maintenance of my car, right? And we have to understand that that's the same thing with health insurance. It's not designed to pay for your health and maintenance of your body, which is what we are dealing with, right? We're not dealing with catastrophic things like a car accident and someone got injured or end stage cancer or something. So I think once people start to understand that, like, oh, yeah, that does make sense. Yes, I believe you're paying too much for health insurance, right? Based off of what you're getting. Yeah, I do believe there's something wrong there. But let's stop trying to pigeonhole that system into being entitled to pay for everything, because it wasn't designed for that. It doesn't pay for your public health, such as toilet paper, your organic food or food in general, or your water bill or anything like that, right? That's still health related. So if you want health, if you want to maintain your body and heal from a chronic condition, that's all on your own, right? That's a whole different story in my opinion, anyways.
It brings a really good point, and we could probably have a whole part two in terms of.
I know, a can of worms I brought up there. I know.
I know it's great. It's great. I like just to add to it though, in terms of, I just think the definition of healthcare is wrongly suited. It's not considered. It should be considered sickness care. And then I think other paradigm shift that you're seeing with third parties are going towards healthcare, in terms of having people be healthier and paying them to be healthier and saving money all around, right? I mean, you can see if the third parties are starting to get the idea of outcome assessments and will prove to me that we can anoint you with 5 visits, and after 5 visits you can show that that person's getting better, and we'll control how much money we're giving you, the doctor, but we won't really control how much surgery and other things that we're doing. But now at some point a critical mass comes out where, wait a minute, we actually get them healthier, we save money. What an idea. And so I think you're coming around to a definition change and paradigm shift of wellness care, not sickness care. There's a lot of big albatrosses in terms of pharmaceutical industries and other things that have a say in which way it goes. But I was just talking to another guy that's developing a really cool app where you can be in charge of your day-to-day stats, your heart rate variability, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your sympathetic response, your glucose, your ketones, your blood work. And you, the consumer, are empowered to understand those numbers so that you really do have a wellness-based model of understanding the connections between what you do and how it impacts your health, and thereby being a real health care system versus a sickness base. So it's a whole model that was a great topic. But I guess I always like to ask my guests, Brant, in terms of, given that my demographic and yours too is the exhausted, the burnt out, the not getting to the next level and moving the needle. I always like to ask my guests if you knew now if you knew then what you knew now with just health and wellness for your own self, and understanding what you could have done to have a better, stronger, bigger, faster stress response system for your own health. What would be some, the main thing that you would have done differently just for yourself?
Man, I wish I would have found this stuff when I was a lot younger. I mean, I got into this, I was about 18 years old when I first found applied kinesiology, and that first doctor, quote unquote, diagnosed me, but really, it was more of an analysis, right? And figured out some different things with me. And I was a track athlete, football player, basketball, whatever. Man, I wish I would have found this stuff when I was younger. I mean, so many things would have been just better in my body. My track career ended my freshman year. Oddly enough, my training partner in the 100-meter dash, he went on to get 7th in nationals, and I was faster than him. Still eats me up to this day, but I got that injury and I had some other, things going on. So it'd be so nice if people can get this stuff earlier and younger. You get rid of your parasites or other weird infections that you have. You clean up these old interference fields that are there, whether it's an old broken bone, collarbone. I got stories of those, whether it's the birth trauma that my son had, whether it's a tattoo. I got some weird stories of tattoos and sinus congestion and stuff. You fix these things younger. You fix the cranium so it's not under so much doggone stress. I mean, 80% of your nervous system is up in here, and this thing has to flex and move and do its thing. So it's so much fun for me when I get a young kid in, or like an athlete or something who is 14 years old, and I get to see all these imbalances that they have that they had no idea that they had, an accident waiting to happen. And I just hope more and more people start to realize this, and kind of what I alluded to, step out of the insurance model and start to put put your money where it matters, right? And to put it towards finding those solutions. And hopefully these podcasts and things and videos that both you and I have online are bringing that to us, because we get this younger and younger. We can solve these problems and fix these things that happen when we're little. I mean, life is so much better. It's so much grander. It's so much easier. I mean, me not having my chemical sensitivities anymore, that's fantastic. I still cannot stand being around someone who wears too much perfume, or their deodorant is like, you can smell it 20 feet away, or cigarette smoke, whatnot. I still can't stand the fabric softeners and things. Hey, people, stop using those things, right? Oh, it's obnoxious, but I can handle it. My body doesn't crash anymore. And had I known these things when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I would have never gone through that process. So hopefully these things that we're doing, I mean, it's probably going to reach the parents first, because the parents probably have adrenal fatigue and pain and different things, but hopefully that's trickling down into their kids, because these generations coming up with our poor food supply, it's only getting worse all the time. And, 5G and Wi-Fi and things, and these, cell phones that we're always by our side all the time, it's only going to get harder and more impactful and more dangerous to our stress response system. Hope I answered that question.
No, that's great. I agree 100%. I think that basically you're talking about the preventative model, but it's not as sexy and it's not as motivating when the burning building's already burning, right? Versus, I don't want it to burn. But I would use the analogy of LeBron James. I mean, he realizes that his stock really right now is his ability to play a sport at the highest level. And you look at guys in his class that are already retired, right? And he's still thriving, and he's got a whole team around him that, he spends, I don't know the exact number, but upwards to $1 million a year on, not to say people need to spend $1 million, but it's really an investment, right? I mean, you're looking at it as when we talk to people that decide to do a program with you or myself, they're decisive in the sense, well, I know it's actually more expensive to not fix this, right? Because I can't put a value on not being able to get out of my house. I can't put a value on not being able to earn an income. I can't put a value on being at my grandchild's wedding. I can't put a value on being able to be in my retirement years and being able to not have to worry that there's a public bathroom 2 feet from where I am and being able to get on a plane. I mean, what is that costing you, right? I mean, that's costing you a lot more than the ability to be proactive, and it comes down to cost benefit ratio. And a lot of people don't see that. They're not decisive. They haven't reached rock bottom yet to realize that they don't have, and start when you have a choice. I think when you have the summary of, I wish I would have started earlier, that gives you more of a head start to have a higher quality of life throughout the entire lifespan. So I think that was a great point. So anyways, once again, just repeat to our listeners where they get in contact with you.
Yeah, drlarson.com, DRLARSEN.com.
Good. Awesome. And so I want to thank you so much for being on the call today. I think this went really well. And I know that this helps someone, then we've done a good job nonetheless. And I hope you have a good rest of your day and a great, prosperous year ahead, helping and having some real cool stories with the guy that you had, so that you can share with that with us as well. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure. And for those of you watching this, listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. I've known him for a number of years now, and he's doing some great stuff. And listen.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. We'll see you later.
Take care.